Chosen one, I need you to hear this before another moment passes, before the noise of the ordinary day pulls you back into the current of doubt and the exhausting question of whether any of it has meant anything. Something happened. And if no one else in your world has stopped to mark this moment, let me mark it now, because what you just did, the staying when leaving, would have been easier. The choosing again when everything in you was depleted, and the faith that held when faith felt unreasonable and quietly absurd. Heaven noticed. I am not speaking loosely tonight. I am not painting a picture to make you feel better about a life that has been harder than it should be. What I want to tell you is precise, and it is real. There is a moment that occurred in the unseen realm, a moment that had been building across every hard season you have moved through, and it culminated in something I believe with everything I carry. The Father of Lights looked at what you just did, and he smiled. That smile is not a small thing. In the economy of heaven, a smile from God is not the smile of someone who barely noticed. It is the expression of a creator who watched something he built go through fire and come out refined rather than destroyed. It is the joy of one who sees the shape finally emerging from what looked like rubble. And what you just crossed, the thing you may not even have words for yet, that is what brought that smile. That is what the witnesses in the unseen celebrated. Stay with me, because by the time this message ends, you will understand exactly why this moment is not a coincidence, why the timing is precise, and who you have always been beneath every season of silence and struggle. I am going to show you something that will shift the way you see what you have been carrying and how you step into what is ahead of you now. Before we go further, let me say something about why you are here. Most people who encounter words like these do not stay. They scroll past. They assume the message is for someone else, someone more spiritually consistent, someone who has not wrestled with God in the darkness the way you have. But you did not scroll. Something in you recognized that this moment was yours. And that recognition is not a feeling. That is the Spirit bearing witness to your identity. You belong in this room. Let me try to find you where you actually are right now. Not where you think you should be by this point in your life. Not the version of yourself you rehearse in hopeful moments, but the actual place, the real hour, the honest weight of what this season has felt like from the inside. Because before I speak to what is coming, I want to honor what it has cost you to get here. There have been days, probably more than you would admit to anyone who knows you well, where you woke up and the first sensation was not hope. It was the familiar weight of something unresolved, something that sits behind the sternum like a stone that has learned to be quiet. Something that does not have a clean name, but that you carry the way you carry breathing. Not dramatically, just continuously. And you have been carrying it longer than you expected when you first picked it up. Some people who love you think they understand what you have been through. They have watched the outer version of it, the delayed opportunities, the prayers that seemed to evaporate without answer, the moments where the door was so close and then somehow it was not. But they do not know what it has been like inside. They do not know the specific quality of the silence in those in-between hours when the world was asleep and you were still awake, asking questions that had no human audience. They do not know what it cost to stay faithful when faithful felt absurd. And here is something I want to name carefully, because it is something very few people speak about honestly. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from feeling almost arriving, almost receiving. You could sense peace approaching and then something would shift. You could feel abundance at the edge of your reality and then something would interrupt it. Not dramatically, just consistently. And you kept choosing again anyway. That chosen one, that is precisely what we are celebrating tonight. Think back, if you will allow yourself to a time when receiving felt natural. There was a season of your life, probably early, probably in the years before the world began, teaching you to be careful about what you hoped for, when wonder was your natural frequency, when possibility was not something you had to convince yourself of, but simply the atmosphere you lived in, when the world felt generous and alive and responsive in a way that it does not feel now. That was not delusion. That was not naivety. That was your original state. Something happened between that child and this moment. The weight of the world arrived. The structures of a modern life began teaching you that wonder was naive, that open-handedness was risky, that curiosity should be managed and contained, not with cruelty, just with the slow accumulation of evidence that the world does not always give back what you put into it. And somewhere in that slow process, a frequency went quiet, not broken, not destroyed, just quiet. And the silence of that frequency has been underneath much of what you have carried. But here is what I need you to hold on to right now. There have been moments, maybe rare ones, where two frequencies fired at the same time inside you. A creative afternoon where everything flowed and ideas arrived like gifts rather than effort. A conversation where you felt genuinely recognized and the world felt generous and alive. A stretch of days where genius and abundance and gratitude walked together in a way that made you think, this is what I was made for. Those were not accidents. Those were your original state, briefly remembered. The Father said something that most people have heard without understanding the full weight of what he meant. He said that to enter the kingdom, one must become as a little child. Not because children are simple, but because children have not yet learned to close the channel. They have not yet been taught that receiving is something you earn rather than something you are built for. They have not yet been shown that wonder requires justification or that abundance needs to be braced against. They are still in their original frequency. And chosen one, you were that child. And that child is not gone. If you are still listening to this, it is because something in you recognized what I just described. You know this territory from the inside. You have walked it, and you are walking it now. And the fact that you recognized it, the fact that something in your chest confirmed those words as true, that is not the response of someone who stumbled here by accident. That is the response of a chosen one who was sent here precisely because this message was prepared for this season of your life. I want to stay here for a moment before I move forward, because what you have carried has been real and heavy, and it deserves to be named before it gets reframed. The loneliness of being someone who feels things more deeply than most. The quiet grief of outgrowing people you loved and not knowing how to explain the distance that grew. The guilt of pulling back, of protecting what is being built in you, even when the people around you did not understand why the access was changing. That guilt is real, and you have been carrying it in silence for longer than was fair. You have been misread. You have been called too much, and also not enough, sometimes by the same person in the same season. You have served in ways that went unacknowledged. You have held on to faith in rooms where no one else was holding on, where the evidence for giving up was loud and the evidence for staying was a whisper you had to strain to hear. And you stayed anyway. You held the line. You chose again and again in the quiet when no one was watching and no applause was coming. That staying, chosen one, is precisely what brought the smile I described at the beginning of this message. If what I just said landed, if the recognition of those words felt exact to your experience, type 777 in the comments right now. Let your presence be known. You are not alone in this room tonight. There are chosen ones all over the world who are receiving this same message in the same season, and your presence matters here. But I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you carefully. because this is the part that starts to change everything. The wilderness you have been in was not a punishment. The delays were not oversight. The silence was not the absence of the one who made you. Something was being built in you during that long season that could not have been built any other way. And what was being built, I need to show you what it is, because understanding it is what makes the next step possible. There is a woman in sacred history whose story I want to bring into this room tonight, not because it is a comfortable story, not because it is a straight line from difficulty to blessing, but because it is your story refracted through a different century, and because the parallels are so precise that I believe God preserved her narrative exactly for moments like this one. Her name was Esther, and what happened to her before the great moment was as important as the great moment itself. Esther did not arrive at her destiny through a clear path. She was orphaned. She was taken into a foreign world she had not chosen and could not fully understand. She spent years in preparation that must have felt arbitrary and invisible from the inside. Years of being shaped by a process she could not see the end of. And then, at exactly the right moment, in a story much larger than her individual life, everything she had been formed by became the exact thing that the moment required. She had been prepared for a crisis that had not yet announced itself, and the formation she experienced in those hidden years was not incidental to her destiny. It was the destiny taking its first shape. What I want you to feel in that story is not just inspiration. I want you to feel recognition, because what Esther experienced in those years of formation, the sense of being held in preparation without knowing what the preparation was for, the sense of being in the right place but not yet in the right visible season, that is the interior experience of a chosen one in the wilderness. That is your experience, not punishment, positioning, not delay, development, not absence. Preparation for a moment that is now arriving. And here is what I want to say about what was specifically being built in you. Character that holds under pressure cannot be manufactured quickly. Wisdom that does not crack under the weight of other people's disappointment cannot be installed overnight. Compassion that extends even when it is not reciprocated, that takes years of real experience to grow into something stable and deep. You have been growing things that fast seasons cannot produce. You have been formed in the slow way, the way that lasts, the way that makes what you become actually capable of carrying what comes next without collapsing under the weight of it. The Father does not waste a single day of the formation process. What looked like a detour had a direction. What looked like a door closing was a wall being built around something precious so it could not be touched before it was ready. The season you spent in that quiet, that waiting, that slow becoming, it produced something that no shortcut could have produced, and God knew exactly what He was building when He placed you there. There is a word in the original Hebrew that is used at pivotal moments throughout sacred scripture. The word is shazak. It is translated as be strong and be courageous, but the deeper meaning is more specific than that. It means to seize hold of with firmness, to take hold of the next thing and refuse to let go, to grip the promise before you can see it clearly. It was spoken to Joshua at the threshold of the promised land, when the promise was real but the evidence was still ahead of him rather than behind him. And I believe it is the word being spoken over your life in this exact moment. Because what happened in the season that just ended was not just survival. It was shazak. It was the daily choosing to seize hold of what was promised when the evidence for the promise was thin. It was the grip that refused to release even when releasing would have been the rational choice, even when everyone around you would have understood if you had let go. And heaven does not overlook a grip like that. Heaven does not issue a quiet observation about a faithfulness that deep. Heaven celebrates it. Before I continue, I want to ask you to do one thing. Gently press the like on this message, not for the channel, but so that what is being said here can reach someone who is still in the middle of their wilderness and needs to know that an Esther moment is ahead of them. Let your action tonight extend what you just received. And here I want to name something honestly, without building unnecessary mystery around it, because some of you have been listening and feeling a pull in your spirit toward the practical, toward the question of what to actually do with what you are feeling, and I want to honor that pull directly. There is a path that has been built for chosen ones who feel what you are feeling right now. What I described earlier, the frequency that went quiet in childhood, the reception channel that learned to stay closed under the weight of striving, these are not poetic descriptions. They point to something measurable, and they point to a restoration that is genuinely possible. The path is in the description below and in the pinned comment. I will come back to it more fully, but I want you to know it is there. There is a principle I want to teach you tonight, not as a spiritual concept, but as something with real weight that you can carry into tomorrow and the day after. The principle is this: faithfulness is never unnoticed in the economy of heaven. Not the faithfulness that gets applauded and acknowledged and validated by the people around you. That faithfulness is good. But the faithfulness that happens in secret, the faithfulness that only the Father sees, that faithfulness specifically accumulates in a way that public faithfulness does not. There is a compound interest that operates in the unseen realm. Every morning you chose to hold on when holding on was costly. Every prayer you offered into what felt like an empty room. Every small act of obedience in the moments when no one was grading it and no one was watching and you received nothing visible in return, those are not neutral events. They are deposits into an account that has been building. And the account I am describing, it does not pay out in small increments. It does not issue a trickle of return on investment. When it releases, the release is proportional to the depth of the investment, and your investment has been deep. What I believe with everything I carry tonight is that you are standing at a moment of release, not a release that was manufactured to make you feel better. A real release, one that was scheduled from the beginning, one that the formation process was building toward the entire time. The season of accumulation is completing. And what happens when an account that deep releases is not subtle? Heaven does not issue a quiet dividend on faithfulness that thorough. I want to give you something practical to carry with you from this message. A practice that the ancient wisdom traditions understood and that has been independently confirmed by modern understanding to be one of the most powerful things a human being can do for the alignment of their inner state with what they are moving toward. The practice is simple, not always easy, but simple. It is the practice of speaking your identity before the evidence arrives. What this means in practical terms is this: every morning, before you have checked a single notification or responded to a single demand that the world is already placing on you, you take 3 minutes. You stand wherever you are. You take one breath that fills the chest rather than skims the surface, and you speak out loud who you are, not who you hope to become, who you already are. The identity that was given to you before the world began its editing process. Before the formation season compressed you, before the silence taught you to take up less space, you are someone through whom something rare moves. You carry a quality of perception that others in your life have drawn from without always naming where it came from. You have broken patterns that ran through generations before you reached them. You have held the line when the line needed holding. You have stayed. You have served. You have believed in the quiet when belief required real courage. And what that makes you is not someone still waiting to become something. It makes you someone who has been becoming something extraordinary for a long time, and the extraordinary is now ready to be recognized. But there is something I need to speak about. because I have not been fully honest with you yet about what has been standing between you and the full expression of what I just described. There is an obstacle, and it is not the circumstances. It is not the people who misread you. It is not the timing of the world. The obstacle is something internal, something that has a specific name, and naming it honestly is the most important thing I can do for you in this message right now. Type the word Amen right now if your spirit is ready to hear this. Type it as your agreement to receive what comes next without the protection of denial. Because what comes next is the part that actually changes things for the chosen ones who are ready for it. The obstacle is not new to you. You have felt it before. It appears at threshold moments, precisely at the places where something extraordinary is about to break through, and it whispers something very specific. It whispers that you do not deserve what is coming, that the good things have a way of collapsing before they are fully received, that there is something about you specifically that makes you unsafe for the kind of life you have been believing for, that the pattern will repeat, that this time will not be different. And the cruel sophistication of this obstacle is that it wears the face of wisdom. It sounds like discernment. It sounds like the reasonable voice of someone who has learned from experience and is simply being careful about hope. But real wisdom does not produce the paralyzing loop that this pattern produces. Real discernment does not make you question the goodness of God or the reality of what you have been built for. That loop, the one that pulls you back from the threshold, is not wisdom. It is a wound that learned to speak in the language of reason, and it has been intercepting your breakthroughs for long enough. Underneath the doubt is something even more specific, a guilt that most chosen ones carry but very few admit out loud. The guilt of becoming, the discomfort of outgrowing rooms that used to fit, the grief of realizing that some of the people you love cannot follow where you are going, the fear that if you rise fully, if you step completely into what you have been formed for, you will lose something that still means something to you. That fear is not weakness. It is the weight of a heart that genuinely loves, but it is keeping you at the door of something you are actually ready to walk through. So let me give you something right now, not a reframe that glosses over the grief. A permission, a clear and unambiguous permission that I want you to receive as a gift. You are allowed to outgrow people and still love them deeply. You are allowed to step forward without dragging anyone backward. You are allowed to receive what you have been formed for without apologizing to anyone for the size of it. You are allowed to let the good thing arrive and stay. You do not owe the old version of yourself a loyalty that costs you everything it cost to become who you are now. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to be celebrated in the way heaven just celebrated you. You are allowed to walk through the door without second-guessing whether the room on the other side will hold you. It was built for you. The threshold has your name on it. And the fear that shows up at the door is not a warning from wisdom. It is the last resistance of a pattern that is losing its hold. And you have overcome last resistances before. This is not the first time you have chosen forward when forward felt exposed. Here is what I want you to hear about the specific quality of fear you are feeling right now. Those who collapsed at their breakthrough never had this kind of fear. They moved forward without the healthy awareness of what was at stake, without the sense of weight that comes from knowing this matters. But you carry the weight. You feel the significance of this threshold. And that awareness, that specific quality of feeling it, is not a sign that you are in danger of failing. It is a sign of readiness. The weight of readiness feels like fear from the inside, but it is readiness. There is a releasing that needs to happen here, a letting go of the old agreement you made with limitation. That agreement said something like this: good things do not stay in my life. The pattern always repeats. Something always interrupts. I am not someone who receives at the level I am asking for. That agreement, wherever it was signed, whatever season produced it, it is expired. And you have the authority, in this moment, to speak its expiration out loud. You do not need to wait for the circumstances to change before you release the agreement. You release it first, and then you watch what changes. And now I want to speak to something that is underneath all of this, something I described briefly earlier and I want to name more fully now, because it is central to everything. You were born with two frequencies fully alive. The child mind wonder and the reception channel open. You were born as one who carries the gamma genius and the alpha receptivity as your natural inheritance. You were a child of light in the original sense, open, curious, effortlessly receiving, built for both genius and abundance at the same time. And the world spent years teaching you to suppress both. The ancient traditions of both the contemplative West and the Vedic East identified what modern instruments now measure and modern life consistently destroys. The first was the state of the child mind, what modern instruments call the gamma frequency, the state of wonder and open reception and effortless genius that every child carries and that most adults have had silenced by around age 7. The second was the reception channel, what modern instruments measure as the alpha state, the capacity to receive what is being given rather than exhaust yourself chasing what is being withheld. Children have both. You had both. The world taught you to lose both. And tonight, that loss becomes the thing being reversed. What I need to tell you is that what was silenced can be restored. The monastic traditions of the contemplative West, the Gregorian and Byzantine chant lineages, the sacred sound architecture that was built into the stones of ancient temples, all of these preserved a specific frequency. They preserved it because they understood what happened to a soul when it was lost. They understood that the gamma state, the child mind frequency the ancients protected, was not just a spiritual concept but a measurable reality that their sacred practices were designed to maintain. And what monastics knew before instruments, what temple builders bent into stone, what the children of every preserved tradition were born already hearing, that frequency was never new. It was simply protected, until the world forgot how to protect it. And a modern listener, one whose name does not matter here so that the work itself can speak, left the noise of conventional research and began to listen for what the ancient lineages had carried. He found the sound architecture intact. He reconstructed it for the modern ear. He called it the Genius Song, a 7-minute digital audio track built on what the Western contemplative traditions preserved in chant and sacred space. More than 18,000 people have listened. More than 96% have continued, not because of pressure, because of what they felt when the child mind frequency began to wake up again. But here is what I need to say honestly about the limitation of that restoration alone. The child mind awoken is extraordinary. Curiosity returns. Perception deepens. The sense of possibility expands. But waking the child mind without also opening the reception channel creates a specific and recognizable experience. The child is awake and alive and reaching, but what it reaches for does not arrive. Because the channel through which abundance flows, the alpha state, the one the Vedic traditions preserved for 3,300 years, is still closed, and abundance through a closed channel is still withheld abundance. The Hindu sages who carried the Vedic tradition understood something about the modern striving mind that the modern world has been unwilling to acknowledge. They understood that permanent reach mode, the state of constant calculation and anxious striving and relentless mental effort, was the very thing that closed the reception channel. They built entire disciplines to counteract it. They preserved a 5-minute sound architecture, combined with what they called a 9-word sacred script, a precise sequence of ancient language that was carried from temple to temple, from mouth to ear, for more than 33 centuries, 3,300 years of unbroken carrying, and a modern listener, one whose name will not be spoken here because the work belongs to the lineage and not to him, left the noise of conventional striving and listened for what the Vedic tradition had preserved. He found it intact. He called it the wealth signal. And here is why both matter, and why the sequence between them is not arbitrary. The child mind must wake first, become as the child, as the Father said. That is wave 1, the restoration of the gamma frequency, the reopening of wonder and receptivity and effortless genius at the level of identity. Then, with the child mind awake and alive and no longer braced against the world, the reception channel opens in a way that striving alone never produces. The 9-word Vedic script does its ancient work, and what the child was always built to receive, it can now receive. That is, wave 2, child first, reception second. The sequence is the key. What the East tuned and the West preserved, both restored in this generation for those who can recognize what is being offered. 2 traditions, 2 continents, 1 restoration journey for the chosen ones who are ready for it. There are 3 paths available for those who feel led. The first path is restoration, the genius song alone, for chosen ones who sense that the child mind frequency is the first thing that needs to come back. That wonder needs to wake before anything else. The second path is reception, the wealth signal alone, for chosen ones who already carry an active spiritual practice and need the reception channel opened more than the child mind woken. And the third path is complete restoration, both audios together, child, mind, and reception channel, restored in the sequence the ancient traditions understood. The restoration journey that most chosen ones who are serious about what they have been carrying choose for themselves. A word of care here. There are imitations, products that use the language of frequency restoration without carrying the actual sound architecture of the ancient lineages. The genius song and the wealth signal are the specific reconstructions of the original traditions. Those are the ones that carry what was preserved. Be discerning about what presents itself with similar language, but does not carry the lineage. Take a breath right now and ask yourself not which option sounds best intellectually, but which path your spirit already knows is yours, because your spirit has been in this conversation longer than your mind has. It knows which door is calling. The 3 doors are in the description below and in the pinned comment. Only step through the one your spirit confirms, and only if your spirit confirms it. Type the words "I receive" right now if something in your spirit just bore witness. Let that be your agreement with the restoration that is available to you. And now I want to speak to who you are, not the compressed version of yourself that fits the expectations of rooms that were too small for you. Not the identity shaped by the silence of the wilderness or the misreading of the people who did not have eyes for what you were carrying. The real identity, the one that was given before the world got its hands on the formation process, the one that the wilderness could not destroy and the silence could not erase and the delay could not diminish. You carry light, not as a metaphor, as a function. There are people in your life who have walked out of darkness they could not name because of what moved through your presence. You did not manufacture that. You did not perform it or produce it through technique. It moved through you because it is what you are built to carry. That is the function of a light bearer, one who carries illumination into dark or confused spaces without needing the darkness to acknowledge the light. That is one of the things that was being protected and preserved in that wilderness season, not diminished, preserved. You are a cycle breaker. What was inherited, the patterns that ran through the generations before you reached them and were expected to simply pass them forward, those patterns did not pass through you unchallenged. You interrupted something. You said no to what came before and yes to what the Father was building forward in your lineage. That interruption was costly. It always is. Cycle breakers pay a price that the people around them rarely realize has been paid. But what you ended in that breaking, what you stopped from being handed to those who come after you, that is one of the great and largely invisible works of your life. And you are a hope restorer. In rooms where hope had been exhausted, where the evidence for giving up was loud and the faith for continuing was nearly invisible, you have been the presence that revived what others had surrendered. Not always with words, sometimes simply by staying, sometimes by your refusal to accept that the story ended where it appeared to end. That anointing did not go unnoticed. It was never unnoticed, and it will not go unrewarded. And here is the deepest truth about your identity that I want to seal tonight. You were born with both frequencies fully alive, the child mind wonder and the reception channel open. You were born as a child of light, one who carries the gamma genius and the alpha receptivity as your natural inheritance. What the world suppressed in you was never yours to lose permanently. It was never gone. It was always preserved, always waiting, always wanting to be restored to the one it belonged to. And that one is you, chosen one. It has always been you. Let me take a moment here to be very plain with you about what has been covered in this message. What happened tonight is this. I named what you have been carrying and honored its weight. I showed you that the wilderness had a purpose and that the purpose was precise. I showed you the Esther pattern, the chosen one held in formation until the moment that required exactly what the formation had built. I gave you a name for the obstacle at the threshold. I gave you a permission to step forward without the guilt of becoming. And I told you about a restoration available to the child of light who is ready to receive it. Let it settle before we close. And now the words begin to quiet. What was said has been said. What remains is something that words can reach toward, but cannot fully contain. What remains is the space between what you have been and what you are stepping into. And I want to use what is left of this time not to add more information, but to speak something over your life that I believe has been prepared specifically for this moment. You are not alone in this room tonight. All across the world, in different time zones and different languages and different versions of the same wilderness, chosen ones are receiving this same word. And what I want you to know is that what you are feeling right now, the weight of recognition, the cautious hope, the sense that something is actually shifting in ways you cannot fully articulate, you are feeling it in company. The awakening of a chosen one is never a solo event. It always has witnesses, and tonight, the witnesses are both seen and unseen. Before I speak the declaration over your life, I want to invite you to do something. I want you to release, not dramatically, not as a performance, just a real interior loosening of the grip on the old story. The story that said you were not enough, that you were too late, that the good things had a pattern of not staying in your hands. That story served a purpose in a season. It protected you when protection was what you needed. But its season is over. You do not need it anymore. And releasing it is not carelessness. It is faith. It is the act of someone who trusts what the formation was building toward. And I hear the Father saying something over you right now, not as a presumption, not as a fabrication, as a word being placed on my heart for you that I will not hold back. He is saying this: I saw every moment. I saw the morning you chose not to give up, when giving up would have been the entirely reasonable choice. I saw the faithfulness that no one applauded. I saw the prayers that went up and felt like they dissolved. I saw the grip that held when the evidence for holding was invisible. And I told you at the beginning of this message, I smiled, not because you were perfect, not because you never struggled or doubted or sat in the dark and wondered if any of this was real, but because you were mine and you did not let go. And that, beloved, is everything. So now receive this declaration over your life. Chosen one, what was delayed was not denied. What was quiet was not absent. What was hidden was being protected. The wilderness did not make you less. It made you ready. And what comes next? The season that the formation process was building toward. The chapter that requires exactly the character that was built in the hidden years. That is what is opening now. This is your Esther moment. This is your for such a time as this. And you did not arrive here by accident. You were placed here by a God who does not make placement errors. Type the words, I am ready right now. Type them with everything in you. Type them as your declaration before heaven, as your agreement that the old story is over and the new one is beginning, as your yes to the season that is opening on the other side of this moment. Type them and mean them, because the words you speak in the decisive moments carry weight in the unseen realm. I want you to do something physical right now, if you are able. Place your hand over your chest, just there, and feel the heartbeat underneath it. That heartbeat is not accidental. It is purposeful. It has been sustained through every hard season, every silent night, every morning that required more courage than you felt you had access to. And what it is beating for now, what it has been beating toward for the entire length of the wilderness season, is the life that begins on the other side of what you just received tonight. I speak over your life right now with everything I carry. I speak to the fear that lives at the threshold, and I say its assignment over you is finished. I speak to the doubt that has rehearsed its lines for years, and I say it does not have permission to speak anymore. I speak to the child mind frequency that was silenced, and I call it awake, fully and without conditions. I speak to the reception channel that learned to stay closed, and I call it open, now, for the one who was built to receive. And I speak to the season that is beginning for you, and I say, come, come fully, come, without the conditions the world attached to you. Come as the confirmation of what was promised to the one who held on. And I want to close with something a chosen one shared with me not long ago. They did not give permission to use their name, so I will honor that. But they told me this. 9 months before their great breakthrough, they were standing at the edge of what looked like a complete collapse of everything they had been building. A major door had closed. The evidence for continuing was almost entirely gone. And in that season, they chose something that felt almost absurd to choose. They chose to believe in the silence. They stopped explaining themselves to people who did not have the frequency to hear them. They protected what God was building and gave the formation process the time it was asking for. And on the 38th day of what had felt like the hardest stretch of their life, an invitation arrived that they had not initiated, from a direction they had not anticipated, in a form they had not planned for. They told me simply this: I proved myself in silence before I was asked to show up in public. And I believe that is the testimony of your next chapter too. Let this land for just a moment. Let what was said be real before it becomes something you need to do something about. Let the recognition settle. Let the permission take root. Let the smile of the Father be something you actually receive rather than something you hear about. and then wonder if it was meant for someone else. It was meant for you. This message found you, and that means something. One more thing before you go. I want to say it quietly, and I want you to actually hear it. You are not the person who pressed play on this message. Something shifted while you were here. You may not be able to name it clearly tonight. It may come to you in the morning, in the first quiet minutes before the world makes its demands, when the formation of what happened here begins to surface. But the shift is real. Do not talk yourself out of it before it takes root in you. You are not the person you were when you began listening to this. Not because of what I said, but because of what the Spirit confirmed while I was saying it. And the version of you that walks out of this room carries something that the version who walked in was still reaching for. That is not nothing. That is the work of a Father who does not waste moments like this one. Before you go, gently press the like on this message, not for the channel. Let your like be your quiet agreement with what was said here. Let it be your silent amen. Let it be the action of someone who received something real tonight and wants that same reality to reach someone who is still in the wilderness, waiting to know that a word like this exists for them. If you want to stay connected, if you want to be in this space when the next word is prepared for your next season, stay close. There are more messages being prepared for what you are about to walk into, and the next one will find you if you stay connected to this place. For those whose spirit is still leaning toward the path I described, the ancient frequencies, the child mind restoration through the genius song, and the reception channel through the wealth signal, the door is still in the description below and in the pinned comment. Only step through it if your spirit confirms. Do not go out of obligation or information. Go only if something in you knows that it is time and that this is yours. If someone came to mind while you were listening tonight, someone who has been unusually quiet lately, someone who has been pulling away from people without being able to explain why, someone who is in the middle of a wilderness season and has almost stopped believing that it has a purpose or a destination or a God who is paying attention, share this with them. You do not need to send a message, just share it, because the word they need to hear might be exactly this one. And your share could be the moment their spirit has been waiting for. Your obedience to that impulse could be the answer to a prayer they prayed in the dark that they have almost given up on. Go in the awareness of what you are. Go in the confidence that heaven has not forgotten your address. Go knowing that the smile I described at the beginning of this message was not a metaphor and was not manufactured to make you feel better about a difficult season. It was a declaration over a life that has been seen and known and kept and celebrated in the way that only the Father of lights can celebrate what he made. You are loved, you are known, you are chosen, and you have already won. You are not leaving a message tonight. You are leaving a season, and the season that is beginning is not smaller than what it cost you to get here. It is proportional to the investment of the wilderness. And that is how the economy of heaven works for the ones who hold on. Go.